Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it, and I echo all of the comments that others have already made today. David's and Dina's, who I caught, and I'm sure others. Great to be here virtually, I guess, as we talk through this event, and excited to try to give an update here. Um, that said, those look like my slides. I'm with Dina in her comments about looking forward to being able to get back to doing these kinds of events in person. It's definitely, I've quite frankly had enough of these, although I enjoy being able to talk and participate in these. I very much am looking forward to doing these in person, hopefully sometime soon. So
As
with that,
yeah,
why don't
so
you go ahead and jump ahead? Perfect. I don't know that I can drive any of these. So the Center for LNG is a trade association we represent. On that next slide, there is a good overview of who our members are. Represent the large-scale liquefaction companies who are currently exporting natural gas out of the United States. There are 6 projects in total. We have a total of 11 members currently that we represent. Obviously, some names there that everyone probably recognizes or is familiar with. If we move on, I'll talk a little bit more about what we're seeing as far as exports go. Dina had alluded to in her comments that today is one of the either forecasted to be the highest demand day of the year or close to it. LNG is obviously contributing to some of that demand. I think this morning estimated demand was right around a little bit north of 11 BCF a day. As we look at sort of this slide on the right, it's really, I think, telling as it's a bit difficult, maybe difficult to see, but the darker blue boxes represent IEA's revised forecast for gas. And as you look at 2020, which is the third bar sort of in there, right there, we're recognizing roughly 400 BCM or 4,000 BCM of gas demand for 2020, and where we wound up with was closer to about 380 or so, 370 BCM of gas, 370,000 BCM of gas. So really, what we're seeing as a result of COVID was a significant drop off in that demand. And what we're starting to see now is that rebound happening already, right? The facilities that are currently in operation are operating at almost near capacity as far as their liquefaction capability goes. We have consistently ramped back up over the last 2 months, 3 months in particular, really, and seeing a lot of that demand recovery start to happen already. And then as we start to look at sort of where we're headed, Asia still represents the largest source for global growth, and it's going to take several years to see the LNG market globally rebound from the effects of COVID. And how long or how many years that takes really depends upon how long it takes for us to vaccinate the world, so to speak. And we see everyone is probably following these variants of the COVID that are out there. If vaccines prove less effective, right, you can start to see this timeline stretch out further. But right now, IEA, they just released this revised forecast, and somewhere sort of 25, 26 timeframe, we start to catch back up to their original forecast. But that growth is going to happen. And really, as we start to see this transition away from dirtier fuels towards this effort to reduce emissions, this is really where we're headed. If we want to advance to the next slide. So we talk about the projects and what that meant in 2020. There are a couple of projects that are and expansions that are currently underway in the U.S. Those continued on during COVID, but what we saw was a slowdown in projects that were seeking FID, which is final investment decision. That's the idea that you've got all of your plans approved from the FERC and the Department of Energy. You've got all of your regulatory permits in hand from the state and local. And you also have commercial agreements in place to prove to a financier that you've got the bankable contracts for the long term to help pay back the cost of these facilities. So when we talk about an LNG facility, order of magnitude in between 10 to 20 billion dollars construction costs to build one of these facilities. So significant capital that needs to be deployed. And when you have demand destruction that was caused from COVID, A lot of these projects that were seeking to reach final investment decision in 2020 were pushed out to 2021, 2022. But I would expect as we are able to recover, we'll start to see more of these projects that were close to reaching FID reach final investment decision in 2021, and we'll move towards that, I think, pretty aggressively as there is pent up demand for gas globally right now, and I would expect that more of that will manifest in the long-term contracts. We can go to the next slide. So shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that we continue to pay attention to is methane. Just this week, the Center for LNG announced our methane principles, and the idea really was something that had been long in motion for us, but formalizing those principles was an important aspect of what our membership was driving the Center for LNG towards. And so really there are sort of three main key points. The rest of these are all found on our website, but it's the idea of continuing to push towards innovative technologies which help reduce these emissions, enhance the measurement and reporting to make sure that we are actually providing an accurate assessment of what the methane emissions look like, not only at our facilities, but also across the entire supply chain, making sure that we are cleaning up our methane emissions as much as possible. And then also continuing to promote our partnership, not only with renewables, but with the broader gas industry as well to address some of these challenges. So these principles are going to continue to be an important aspect of what we do as a membership to interact not only with the government here, but also internationally, right? We continue to see the conversation around methane increasing, not only here in the US, but also in Europe, where we're sending a lot of gas. And I would expect that will also follow on in Asia. It's a little bit more preliminary in Asia right now, but I would expect that they will follow Europe's suit and what the EU has been doing as far as addressing methane. So having these principles in place and having some demonstrable examples of what our members are doing will be critical in the coming weeks and months. We want to go ahead and advance. So probably the largest outstanding question here before I wrap up is what's the new Biden administration going to do with US LNG? And by examining some of the executive actions taken yesterday and looking at what has already been discussed, right? I think from an LNG perspective only, I don't want to speak to the rest of the natural gas value chain, but when we start to really focus on this, there have been suggestions that there's going to be a coming revision to NEPA. That's going to be critical for us. I think that we're paying very close attention to what's going to happen with NEPA and the review process for LNG facilities. One of the other major areas that we're paying really close attention to is what's going to happen with the fossil fuel development and financing. There was an announcement as part of the executive order there that XM would back away from foreign investment in fossil fuels. Looking at that, right, we want to make sure that there are still sources. Gas is going to play an important role for the foreseeable future, and being able to partner with renewables as that expansion happens is going to be critical for the success of renewables. So an area that we want to make sure we're paying quite a bit of attention to is how the financing for fossil fuels continue to develop under this administration. And then last, obviously, Dina had talked to it in her comments, and I'm sure others have previously this morning, but the composition of FERC and what does that mean for LNG facilities and the necessary infrastructure to support those facilities. All remains to be seen, right? Early days here in the administration, but areas that we at the Center for LNG are committed to working with the administration on and helping to explain the important role that LNG has played across the last two administrations, and as we continue forward, will continue to play for the foreseeable future. So I think that's my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. We might have one more. No, absolutely. So the last sort of area that sort of shifting away from what's going to happen domestically with the Biden administration and looking at trade, right, the phase one trade deal with China, we started to see a bit of an uptick in LNG cargoes going to China last year, November. but really not in any sort of enormously significant kind of way. So areas that we would expect as economies start to reopen and demand for LNG starts to grow again. China is an area or a country that we are looking towards as a potential demand center that represents a large opportunity for U.S. LNG. Right now, we're not sending a lot of LNG there because of the trade dispute, but I would expect that as we get further into this, the administration might have a fairly significant impact on how much LNG we are able to send there. So we're paying close attention to those trade issues, right? We're paying close attention to what's happening in the EU as it relates to trade as well, and we will continue to try to vocalize to this administration how important of a tool LNG can be in their foreign diplomatic relations, and as they continue to ramp up at State Department and Trade as well, we will spend quite a bit of time there as part of our ongoing effort in 2021. So with that, I think that those are all the slides that I have now for sure, as I haven't been able to advance them. Dominic, appreciate it for saving me on my technology snafu here, but happy to answer any questions.
Charlie, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it. It was wonderful to hear about how the impact wasn't wonderful, but how you addressed the impact of COVID on your projects and the projected growth in the LNG sector. In your comments, you mentioned Asia has been the largest growth area. Do you think there will be a need for global methane standards one day?
It's a great question. I think that I think if there are the challenge with that, right, is the pace at which others are moving, and so creating some global standard, I think, will prove to be incredibly difficult in providing or creating a consensus as to what those might actually look like. I do think, though, that there are areas or regions around the world right now that are further out ahead. The EU obviously comes to mind in addressing methane. That will probably be a blueprint that others will follow. Whether we get to a point of creating a global methane standard, I'm probably not a buyer of that at this point. I think that it's probably going to be pretty difficult to get consensus around an issue so complex.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one other question. I'm going to take the liberty of asking that. Will natural gas prices impact LNG rebound in 2025 through 2026?
So will a price of gas impact LNG? So, I mean, I think that what we're looking, right, is such a low cost environment at this point that, when you look at the U.S., relative to a JKM or some of these other markets right now that are seeing these high prices because of demand for the short term, it will continue to make the case that a long-term agreement just can't be completely written off. So, the impact of gas prices here, I don't see being fluctuating as a result of any of the LNG demand that's coming. What I do potentially see happening is that low cost continuing to be incredibly attractive, and it will be interesting to see how that global LNG market frees up if new contracts are going to continue to be tied to Henry Hub. The creativity of the LNG market as it matures here in the U.S. Is an area that I think we should all be paying close attention to.
Wonderful. Charlie, thank you again so much. Always a bit of delay when I have to come back in with my video. Thank you again for your presentation and taking the time to be with us this afternoon. And thank you so much for your thoughts and your perspective. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Marjorie. Thanks so much. Take care.